easy. I do have a request for those folks that are listening and following us on the web in South Florida. You would do me a huge favor by not explaining to my mother how to download the app.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's avoid that.
And I'm not so concerned about her watching, but she is a very smart and shrewd lady, and she will figure out that she can also super text live.
Oh, yes. Come on, Mama Bassett. We need that.
And I will get these, invariably text of stop slouching. I can't believe you wore a hoodie to the office.
Did you brush your teeth this morning?
Yeah, that's just a little too much pressure for me. At any rate, we will make do and we will roll with it. So welcome to I don't know what we call them. So we've got callers, we've got super texters, and I guess we have the voyeurs. So hello. I will attempt to adjust to that. And now many of you may be familiar with me already from being a guest with Dan Mandis and as a fill-in host for our tremendous host here at the station. And you may have also caught me doing commentary with our friends at Fox News. And in full disclosure, I do not possess the deep broadcasting experience our listeners are accustomed to. What I do possess is experience in state capitals and in our nation's capital that will hopefully help our listeners unpack and discern what sadly today passes for governance. I've had the opportunity in my career to work in state legislatures for multiple conservative members of Congress, the first Republican governor of Kentucky in 32 years, and most recently served as the Assistant Secretary for Legislation at Health and Human Service for our 45th President of these United States, Donald J. Trump. And the position for which the president nominated me and the Senate eventually confirmed me had me serve as the point person for the White House and Health and Human Services for all matters relating to health and human services to both the House and Senate of the United States. So I've spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill and in the West Wing. So many of the guests I invite on, I have personally worked with and been in the trenches with. And I hope that this will help our listeners get the facts and then be able to form their own opinions on the critical issues that are facing our great country today. And I get asked all the time why I'm doing radio and why I'm not back in D.C. lobbying for somebody. And first of all, I think the biggest problem with our nation's capital is that well-meaning people, they go there to serve, they stay too long, and they never leave. And D.C. has a way of luring you in and seducing folks, and eventually it becomes about them and not the people that they were sent there to serve. I think it's best to go there, serve, and then go home and go back to real life. Even when I served, I got an apartment there in the Navy Yards, and I kept my family here in Middle Tennessee. But the real reason that I am here with you, and for my affiliation for Super Talk 99.7, is that I am greatly concerned about the current trajectory of our great nation. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I am an optimist. And I have full faith that there is nothing so wrong with America that we, the people, cannot address and fix it, but we must drastically change course to avoid being a nation that is in decline. For many of us that served in the Trump administration, it was gut-wrenching to watch us shift from what I would contend is the most pro-America, pro-American policy since the presidency of Ronald Reagan compared to what we are all having to endure today. If I had told you that 2.5 years ago, I took you back in a time capsule and I made these predictions, that after achieving energy independence and for the first time in our country's history becoming a net exporter of energy, and that gas prices were averaging $2.17, that in 2.5 years' time, our energy production would grind to a halt. We would no longer be a net exporter of energy around the world, that gas prices would soar to $5, $6, or $7, that we would have fuel shortages in natural gas and heating oil in the winter, and that we would end up begging countries that hate us, like Colombia and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, to send us more oil. if I had also told you that the economy would nearly grind to a halt, that inflation, that at the time was a benign 1.6%, would rise and stay at 6.6% with no signs of subsiding, and that there would be nowhere that you or your family could hide your money that was safe. If I told you that the prices you and your family would pay for goods and services would dramatically increase, that everyone's 401k would take a 35% hit no matter how you chose to invest. If I told you that after enjoying the most secure border in modern history, that the southern border of the United States would be eviscerated and that 15 million people would simply walk across the border with no resistance from the Border Patrol or the United States military and would disappear into the interior of the United States. If I told you all of these things 2.5 years ago, you might, as a thinking person, logically conclude that this must have been caused by a foreign actor, that maybe China or Russia attacked us, or both. But sadly, we are left with the reality that all of these things were done to us by our own government. A direct result, 1-to-1, of the policies of the Biden administration. And my point, and you're going to hear me talk about this a lot from this microphone, is that policy matters. And it should matter to all of you who love this country far more than personality. Policy, simply put, is decisions made by others that affect the life of you and your family. And as important as policy is, equally important is the cabinet officials and top advisors that a president brings to implement those policies. From Mayorkas, the so-called Secretary of Homeland Security, the man who put his hand on the Bible and swore to protect the integrity of the continental United States. I mean, look, I don't mean to oversimplify this, but we are fortunate. We have an ocean on both sides. We have a border with Canada that has been secure for 200 years. Canadians like to come, spend money during the winter, and go home. So the real one thing in the Secretary's portfolio is the southern border. And on this, he has utterly and completely failed. You look at Senator Granholm on energy. Juxtapose that with what we had under the last administration in Secretary Rick Perry. We had the lowest oil prices that we have ever enjoyed. And we didn't have to beg other nations because we were energy independent. You look at Pete Buttigieg in transportation. Do you remember trying to get a flight in December? And when it comes to his economic advisors, honestly, I can't name his top economic advisor. But the president doesn't listen to the opinions of Democratic advisors of the past, like Austin Goolsbee and Larry Summers, who said, whatever you do, Mr. President, don't spend trillions of dollars in an inflationary economy. And President Biden has virtually no one in the West Wing with any discernible private sector experience. So for tomorrow's show, I want to bring on the actual people who served and advised President Trump to remind everyone of two things. First, that Trump assembled some of the best and brightest minds on these issues, and I wanted our listeners to get to hear from them in their own words. And secondly, to point out that the good news is that we can have all of this back in a year and a half's time. All of the damage can be undone, and a lot of it can be undone in short order. We just need better policy, and we need capable, experienced people to implement it. So you won't want to miss tomorrow's show. First up, we have Stephen Moore, renowned economist who advised the president during the 2016 campaign and advised him on the writing of the Tax Cuts and Job Acts, along with Larry Summers. He has written for too many publications to name, including the Wall Street Journal, the Weekly Standard, and the Washington Times. He will compare and contrast Trump's economy pre-COVID to what we are experiencing today. After him, He'll be followed by acting ICE director and border czar for President Trump, Tom Homan. Tom is an audience favorite. He was also the architect of the most secure border we have ever had. By the end of his tenure, he had brought illegal boarding crossings to a 32-year low. That is what this president inherited. He's also wildly entertaining. It is an understatement to him to say to our listeners that he is furious over where our southern border has become porous and where 15 million people have simply walked into our sovereign nation, or what was once a sovereign nation. And Mac, you may actually need to be on the lookout for some salty language, but when he comes on. But then we're going to have my good friend Rick Grenell. Rick has served in multiple Republican administrations. He served as both the ambassador to Germany and as our nation's top spy, serving as the acting director of national intelligence. This is the guy that gave President Trump his daily security briefings. We will cover the globe from Russia to the Middle East to Africa to South America. And what do they all have in common? Where the U.S., under the Biden administration, has pulled back, China has jumped in. And by the way, that's not just my opinion. A plurality of Americans agree and indicated in a Fox News poll that Biden has been too weak in accommodating towards these countries. 66% on China, 63% on Russia, 63% on North Korea, and 59% on Iran. Now, there's been one small programming note I want to let people know about. Rick Grenell will actually be joining us today at the top of the 11 o'clock hour, and that is because he is going to be traveling tomorrow to Mar-a-Lago to be with the president. We're going to get to everything that's going on in Manhattan today, but Rick is a confidant of the president and is in contact with him on a daily basis, and he's going to give us just what Trump is thinking about that, what is going through with all of this, and he's going to be able to give perspective on what's going to be happening today at 2:15 when the president is arraigned. So you're going to want to stay with us for that. And then to finish tomorrow, we are going to have one of my favorites, Senator Bill Hagerty, and he will help us pull this all together. The senator also previously served, as many as you know, as the ambassador to Japan, and it will be great to get his thoughts on what is going on in the work-free drug zone, also known as Washington, D.C. So please be sure to stay with us for tomorrow. We also have a great lineup for the day. At the top of the hour, we will be joined by Tennessee's own, our senior senator, Marsha Blackburn. We will cover all the investigations seeking to prevent the leading Republican candidate from once again pursuing the presidency. But we will also cover the growing threat of China, TikTok, spy balloons. In a case we now know it is far worse than what the administration has led us to believe. And, of course, the crisis on our southern border. And she will also talk about her efforts to rein in ever-growing federal spending. So stay with us. After the break, we will lay out everything, including facing former Trump. And as someone who served during multiple fake scandals, I hope to provide you a little perspective on all of this. We're going to do a short commercial break, and we will be right back on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Got a crash on the Northwest Loop downtown. The off-ramp is partially blocked from 65 South to I-40 West, causing about a 16-minute delay. We've got expanded school safety measures to talk about in Tennessee. Also, former President Trump's indictment in New York. Coming up at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back, listeners. This is Matt Bassett. And as Ken just pointed out, with the trial today, or the arraignment rather, today is indeed a sad day. There's kind of no other way to look at this. For the first time in our nation's history, a former president has been charged with a crime. This has never happened. At 2:15 Eastern Time, our former president will be arraigned in Manhattan. He will be booked. He will have his mugshot taken. They will not be subjecting him to a perp walk or handcuffs, as the Secret Service immediately nixed that idea for security reasons. We do not put handcuffs on former presidents. Let's first look at how we got here and how those on the left reacted to this news as it broke last week. Predictably, the women from The View were elated. They spent their entire show, most distastefully, celebrating this sad event. The people who lied to you in Congress about President Trump since he took office were also predictably elated. The leading members of Congress who wished to impeach him since the day he announced and descended on the escalator for his White House run. Congressman Adam Schiff, a.k.a. the human Mr. Potato Head, who has misled and lied to the American people repeatedly regarding President Trump for the last 6 years. Congressman Eric Swalwell, renowned Trump hater, best known for publicly flatulating on CNN and for his relations with known Chinese communist spies. The same Eric Swalwell who was removed from his position on the House Intelligence Committee just days after Speaker McCarthy won back the gavel and got to see his file and quickly removed him from the committee. In fact, it would have been irresponsible not to do such. I mean, if having relations with Chinese spies does not lose you your security clearance or seat on the Intelligence Committee, I am not sure what does, but I digress. What I did find interesting, and it somewhat pleasantly surprised me, was Bill Maher's response to all of this. And after a short break, we're going to let you hear his response in his own words. We'll be right back on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
"9:30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. And again, you got that crash, the Northwest Loop downtown. It is blocking the off-ramp from 65 southbound to go west on 40, about a 19-minute delay now. Governor Bill Lee's expanded school safety plan in light of the Covenant School massacre puts an armed security guard in every school in Tennessee, even private schools if they want one. But Speaker of the Tennessee House Cameron Sexton says they're also focused on mental health.
The governor's proposal expands this in K through 12 schools, gives the schools the capability to handle students in crisis at that moment of time.
Security tied to New York City this morning ahead of former President Trump's historic arraignment. Joe Tacopina, who's part of Trump's legal team, tells Good Morning America the procedure will be relatively routine.
I think there will be a typical processing, which does not take long, 20, 30 minutes. There won't be handcuffs, but yeah, he'll be processed the way anyone else would be to a degree.
No video cameras allowed. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. I've been teaching investing on Nashville airwaves for over 20 years with the Investor Coaching Show. And in that time, I taught a lot about how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11 or jumping into energy stocks or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors, because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
And we're back on Super Talk 997 WTN. Before the break, we were just running through how the lunatics on the left have already responded today. But as I brought up, I was surprised, pleasantly surprised by Bill Maher's response. So I want you to hear from him in his own words regarding this.
I just would like to go on record of saying I think this is a colossal mistake if they bring these charges. Not this one. First of all, it's not going to work. It's going to be rocket fuel for his 2024 campaign. And it's just going to look to MAGA Nation like, oh, you know, you tried with Mueller, you tried with Ukraine, you tried with January 6th, now we go to the porn star? Really? You're down to that?
Yeah, so he points out, and rightly so, he goes on to say that the whole concept of a revenge cycle, using the criminal justice system to go after people that you disagree with politically, is a very bad idea. And he says if we use the justice system in this way now, that he predicts President Biden will be arrested the day he leaves office. And as you heard him further say, that he should not be indicted for this, and that this will add rocket fuel to his primary campaign. And I'm happy and surprised to say that on all points, I agree with Bill Maher. He has kind of become like the adult supervision for the Democratic Party. And people need to understand he's a classic liberal versus a radical woke Democrat. They're not the same thing. And even he gets annoyed with the far left of his party. And there are signs that point that he's right as far as what are the practical results and the effects in the primary with the results of this. A Fox News poll released after the news broke last week now has Trump up 30 points on DeSantis, 54-24. And that's a significant shift from just weeks ago when those same numbers were 43-28. Additionally, Elon Musk took to Twitter and said that if Trump were to be arrested today, he would win re-election in a landslide. But before we get into the specific of the case, let's back up. Donald J. Trump has been the most investigated and persecuted candidate, then president, ever. Those in the radical left wanted to impeach him since before he even took the oath of office. First, we had the Russia collusion hoax perpetrated by Hillary Clinton's campaign that led to spying on Trump campaign by our own intelligence services. When that didn't pan out the way they had hoped, they moved on to a phone call in Ukraine. The president was then impeached for the first time, but acquitted in the Senate in a trial that showed that there was not, in fact, any abuse of power or any obstruction of justice, and he was cleared in the Senate. Then we had January 6th, rinse and repeat, followed by a year-long partisan witch hunt that did not conclude until Republicans took the office and put an end to it. Fast forwarding to today, there are 5, count them, 5 seated grand juries investigating Donald Trump. 1 in New York, 2 in the District of Columbia, and 2 in Georgia. And the ones in Georgia are looking at election interference claims. Now, I want to know, do any of you appreciate the irony in this? A party that claims to be worried about election interference is using every possible tool from big media to distorting and corrupting our legal system, literally picking a person they don't like and attempting to find a crime to ascribe to them. These are the same people that in front of our eyes, as we speak, are perpetuating the biggest election interference of all time, and that they are preventing the leading candidate of the opposition party from seeking a second term as president of the United States. Did you hear Nancy Pelosi's comment that Trump will have a chance to prove his innocence? Really? Is that how our justice system works? Guilty until proven innocent? That's how warped these folks have shown themselves to be. So all this leads us to Trump's arraignment today. We have in Manhattan, a New York County DA who campaigned on getting Trump, bringing a case that the federal authorities who actually have jurisdiction over campaign finance law, both the FEC and the Justice Department, looked at years ago and chose not to pursue. All of the suits pending against Trump, almost the entire legal universe on both sides have said this is the weakest case, has little chance of going to trial, and even less of a chance of conviction. By the way, we should know nothing about this trial right now. We shouldn't know anything until it's officially released later today. But this jury has been leaking like a sieve by design, so here we are. 34 felony counts. And we don't know what President Trump is actually charged with until later today, but it does appear to be related to the nuisance claim relating to Stormy Daniels. And the DA will then attempt, and what they call novel attempt, to tie this to federal law to show that campaign violations have occurred. Now, several problems arise with this from the get-go. First, the claim is 10 years old and will face a statute of limitations issue. I have also never seen anyone even allege that anything other than personal funds were used to pay any claims, so it's not related to the campaign. Celebrities pay nuisance claims all the time to get rid of salacious or false claims. It is not a crime. Even the DA claims it was to keep the story, even if the DA claims, as he will, it was to keep the story quiet during the 2016 campaign, it wouldn't matter legally. Candidates can spend as much money as they want from their personal money on their own campaigns. And Trump spent a lot of it. I want to remind folks of the John Edwards case. Remember him? The Justice Department did prosecute him. It involved 5 of his campaign donors who paid his mistress, who worked in some capacity on the campaign, $1 million to not make their affair public. The jury in this case acquitted Edwards on one charge and could not reach a verdict on the second, resulting in a mistrial. The Justice Department then chose not to refile charges. If his case walked up to the line, Trump's case does not even remotely come anywhere close to the line. What we have in New York is a progressive elected politician disguised as a legal prosecutor. We can't say when or if this will ever go to trial. I think it's in the best interest of the country for a wise and prudent judge, which would be the next step, to step in and dismiss the case. But if it does proceed, it could very well take years to conclude. And by the way, I do think that the judge did us a huge favor by not allowing for cameras in the court for this reason. I think if the cameras were rolling, I think we'd get to a point where Trump would have gotten to a good place. His lawyers would have explained to him that there was no reason for him to take the stand, that no good could come of it. But I guarantee you that when he saw those cameras rolling, I don't think he would be able to help himself. I think it would devolve very quickly into a scene from A Few Good Men. I think Trump would barge up and take the stand, and this DA Bragg would say something along the lines of, Mr. Trump, I'd like to talk to you about expense reports. That's Mr. President to you. Okay, Mr. President, did you, in fact, have errors on your expense report? Are these really the questions you brought me here to answer, DA Bragg? Ledger errors in my company's expense forms. And he'd say, did you order the hush money payments? I did what was necessary. Did you order the hush money payments? You're GD right, I did. And I think this judge's decision, end scene. I think this judge's decision will actually be a huge godsend to Trump and his legal team. And I think that people are understandably riled up about this. I know I am. I think that the anger is less in support or opposition to Donald Trump and really goes to Americans' basic sense of fairness. I think most people are upset at seeing the weaponization of our justice system and different standards being applied depending on what party someone belongs to. You don't have to look any further than the treatment of the various individuals who had classified materials. Hillary Clinton had a server at her house, and no charges were ever filed. President Biden had classified material everywhere, and they knew about it before the election. They knew about it on November 2nd, but the American public did not learn about it until mid-February. Then we get to President Trump, who had documents at Mar-a-Lago. His home was raided by federal agents the summer before the midterm elections. So people ask me all the time, how will this affect the primary race? Well, the truth is nobody really knows. But as Bill Maher predicted, This has added rocket fuel to Trump's primary campaign, and I predict it will continue to do so. But folks, I do want to put a disclaimer out there. I know that many of our listeners support Trump and others do not. Many would like to see another candidate. Many prefer Governor DeSantis and are looking to other candidates who have yet to announce. I have said this before on air, and I want to repeat it. We have a wonderful problem with having great candidates to choose from in our party, any of whom would be markedly better than Joe Biden. I do want to issue a challenge to our super texters. Come up with one example of how President Joe Biden and his policies have improved America. And I'm serious about this. I'll give it a fair shake if you give it a good effort, or even if it's funny, we'll read it on air. But let's look at the Democratic lineup of potential candidates. A Biden reelect after 3 years of nonstop failures and disasters? I want to remind folks that he ran as a centrist that would end the partisan bickering and reunite the country. I ask you, how's that working out? Maybe then the vice president? Same track record problems, with the distinction of being named border czar. Remember how she was going to look at the root causes of immigration in South Africa and South America and solve the problem? Again, how's that working out? Add to that her popularity and poll numbers are on par with the coronavirus itself. And I see her having, well, problems. This leads us to, they throw out names like Pete Buttigieg, a small-time mayor who is that is clearly unqualified for his current position as transportation secretary, who can't even keep the airlines in check or the trains on the rails. But back to the Republican side, I advise everybody to support whoever you choose to support. Republicans are still allowed to support whatever candidates and advocate for whatever policies they feel are best for the country. You can't say that about the other party. If you deviate from the nutty woke agenda at all, you are out with them, and they will cancel you in a heartbeat. As conservatives, as libertarians and moderates, we should be able to find common ground based in this truth that literally anyone is better than who we have now. And let us remember what Ronald Reagan advised us, that someone who you agree with 8 out of 10 times is not your enemy, but a friend that you can work with. I want to end with one of the comments I saw from a super texter, because I have someone bring up very similar points all the time. 9432 writes, I hope we can avoid a knockdown, drag-out fight between Trump and DeSantis that wounds both. Now, I have heard this over and over by many people that I trust and admire, so I'd like to address it. The super texter is absolutely correct and wise that if this could be avoided, it would absolutely be ideal. But I'm not going to pull any punches from behind this microphone, and I'm going to tell you how it is. The fight between Trump and DeSantis is absolutely unavoidable. It has already begun, and it will only intensify between now and the first coming debate in August. If I learned one thing in my various tours in D.C., it is that power is not given, it is taken. We have two trains on one set of tracks that are hurtling towards one another. And I can't believe I'm quoting the movie Highlander, but there can only be one. For Ron DeSantis to get the nomination, he will have to wrestle it from candidate Donald Trump's cold, dead hand. So rather than stress about it, here at Super Talk, we will cover it, all of it. And in the end, support whoever you choose. Either way, we must win the next election. We will be right back after our break on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, the Northwest Loop downtown is still gummed up due to that crash that has the off-ramp partially blocked from 65 southbound to 40 west, right there at exit 84A. We got expanded school safety measures in Tennessee. 3 Democrat state reps face expulsion, and Russia's getting squeezed by NATO. All this and more coming up at 10 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
And we're back on Super Talk 997 WTN. I want to remind folks that at the top of the hour, we will be joined by our senior senator, Senator Marsha Blackburn. We're going to cover a host of topics with her, so you're going to want to stick around for that. After that, we will be joined by Washington insider, our good friend Jack Calaventrinos. I think he's under the impression that we're going to talk about some of the other presidential candidates. We will cover that briefly, but then we're going to talk about what I really want to talk about, and that is the incredible golf tournament, the greatest show on earth, the Masters. Woo. And we're going to real quick, I do want to issue this a second challenge. In addition to finding one good thing that Biden has done in his presidency, I want to ask the super texters if they have any stories that they would like us to share regarding the Masters. What it's meant to you, a fun experience, a funny story. We're going to share some of those, and we're going to get into a little presidential history with the Masters, because Lord knows we need something light and some good news. Following that, we're going to be joined by Ken Alexandro. Ken was a veteran for 26 years with the Nashville Metro PD. He is a security expert, and we're going to cover the heroic actions that took place at the Covenant Presbyterian School last week, and we are going to honor the brave men and women who took part in that, and specifically the 2 that took out the shooter. So we will also open it up to phone calls in the 11 o'clock hour, so that if you have questions for Ken Alexandro, we would both be happy to answer them. So stay with us. Marsha Blackburn is coming up next, and we will be right back on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Ten o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. We still got that crash gumming things up for everybody, pretty much everybody on the loop around downtown, specifically the Northwest Loop. The off-ramp of the right shoulder is blocked from 65 southbound to go 40 west. Governor Lee and lawmakers working to expand to school safety in light of the Covenant School shooting. That will include putting an armed security guard in every public school and private schools if the private schools want one. But there's also a mental health component, which Speaker of the Tennessee House Cameron Sexton backs.
The goal with that funding is not to handle crisis, but to build it and get into the schools so that they never get to crisis.
Speaker Sexton says Tennessee has to do better at providing treatment to people who are threatening to hurt others or themselves. Meanwhile, 3 Democrat state reps face expulsion for breaking House rules by launching a disruptive bullhorn gun control rally on the floor of the House Thursday. Nashville State Rep Justin Jones defended his actions by making comparisons to what the Bible teaches about Jesus in the temple.
I want to talk about this Holy Monday, that God is not pleased with injustice, and that the light will shine, and that no matter what you do to us, we will not bow down.
Representative Jones, you will have your chance to defend yourself on Thursday.
That's when the final votes will be. And new developments in the war on Ukraine, which is seen as a major blow against Russian President Vladimir Putin. Secretary General Jan Stoltenberg announcing Finland is joining NATO, which doubles the size of the U.S. military alliance's border with Russia.
President Putin wanted to slam NATO's door shut. Today, we show the world that he failed. That aggression and intimidation do not work.
Russia has already said it would take what it calls retaliatory measures after Finland joined, although it's unclear how Russia will do that. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
And we're back on Super Talk 997 WTN. Hope everyone is having a great morning. And I am very excited to welcome into the program one of our favorite guests, our senior senator, Senator Marsha Blackburn. Senator, how are you this morning?
I am doing well. Thank you so much.
And I know that with your busy schedule, you're traveling all around at an undisclosed location in the mountains. So I very much appreciate you taking the time, and I'm glad we could get a cell line.
I am also, yes, we're spending some time over on the east end of the state and working with counties. I am in every county in the state every year. And so we're out and about and enjoying being out of D.C. and in Tennessee during this Easter week.
Well, great. Thanks again for joining us. And,
sure.
You know, I wish that we could start by talking about something else, but I wanted to start our time to address the elephant in the room, or more specifically, the elephant in Manhattan. And that is what our former president is having to endure there. Your thoughts on this whole thing?
Well, you know, this is whether people are a fan of President Trump or not, I have found it so encouraging to see people stand up and say this is a miscarriage of the judicial system. Mm-hmm. And in this country, law enforcement goes after crime, what they have done, and what Alvin Bragg promised to do when he ran for DA. He said, you elect me, I'm going to go after Donald Trump. So he targeted the man, and now he has spent an incredible amount of time trying to find a crime and find something that he can stretch to a felony. And this is wrong. This is not how the system is supposed to work. And I thought it was astounding. Nancy Pelosi put out a tweet. And of course, you've worked in DC, you know all these people. And she says he will have an opportunity to prove innocence. Yeah. Well, no, that's backward. You are innocent until you are proven guilty. So got it back. And, you know, Matt, I think one of the things, as I'm traveling around the state and talking to Tennesseans, they look at this. They look at what is happening with our freedoms. They look at what is happening with free speech. They look at what is happening at states' rights. And so many times they will say, I feel like our basic freedoms are under attack. This is exhausting. Every time we turn around, they're trying to control our life, whether it's toilet flushes or shower heads or incandescent light bulbs or washing machines or gas stoves. You know, they're trying to take away our choice and options. They're trying to expand mandates, whether it is through the judicial system or through economic development or through the regulatory state. They just are always trying to whittle away at what we have the power to decide in our communities, in our states. They're trying to increase our taxes. And the list goes on and on. People do feel as if their values and the freedoms, the basic fundamental freedoms in this country, are under attack.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, but I can't help but point out that this DA, who has a pretty documented track record on being very lenient on violent crime, to the extent that I saw one story where someone was attacked in a convenience store, and the person being attacked stabbed and killed his assailant, and this DA charged him with murder.
Yes.
And
yes,
you know,
I saw that.
This hypocrisy knows no bounds. And what just floors me is that a judge in that case had to step in and remove, clear him of the murder charges. And to be frank, I hope that a prudent judge, which would be the next step, just steps in and dismisses this case when he sees just how ridiculous it is after we see the actual charges today.
Right, and we'll know more after we see those charges. But I will tell you one thing that I do know, and it is this: the American people were better off under the policies of President Donald Trump than they are under the policies of Joe Biden. And this morning I was meeting with a group of community leaders, and they were talking about how inflation is making it very difficult for governments and businesses to work. They were talking about crime and their concerns with crime. They were talking about fentanyl. About how a lot of this finds its nexus in this open border, and they're talking about China and supply chains and what the Chinese Communist Party is doing to us, what is happening with China's alliance with Russia, Iran, North Korea, and they want to see normalcy. And some of the things that this administration is doing, it is not normal.
Yes, and you touched on it, Senator, and since I think you were last on with me in December, and with respect to our U.S. southern border, we have talked about this extensively, and since we last talked, it has only demonstrably got worse, and there appears to be no end in sight. And one of the reasons I was so happy that Republicans were able to retake the House was that we would finally have oversight. And I predicted, as someone who advised the secretary, that this was going to be a very bad week this week for Secretary Mayorkas, and we found out that in fact is the case. The answers that he gives to members of the Senate and to members of the House is really inexplicable. And I just want to call to folks' attention this excerpt from his 60-minute interview. This is Mayorkas speaking. I think that we face a very serious challenge in certain parts of the border. The reporter: do you view what's happening right now on the border as a crisis? Mayorkas: it's a significant challenge. Reporter: why won't you say the word crisis? Mayorkas: you know what? Because I have tremendous faith in the people of the Department of Homeland Security, and a crisis speaks to me of a withdrawal from our mission, and we are only putting more force and more energy into it. That was the best answer that he could muster. And I find it unbelievable that while he has faith in the people at Border Security, none of his employees have faith in him.
Well, and see, that's the disconnect, because he can't answer the questions. When he came before us at Senate Judiciary Committee last week, he could not give us an answer. I asked him about the 85,000 alien children, that unaccompanied children, that HHS has lost. And the week before at Finance Committee, Bassett, the Secretary of HHS, admitted to me that they had lost 85,000 children. And what are they doing to find these children? Where are they? How do they know these children are not being trafficked? How do they know they're not in gangs? How do they know they're not being put into work for the cartels? And they don't know. And here's the thing that gets me is what they are doing down there. This is intentional. This is what they want.
Yes.
This is their policy. Last year, we had people from 176 different countries that came across that southern border. We had terrorists. We have Chinese nationals that are flooding across that border. We have criminal aliens that are coming across that border because countries are emptying out their jails and turning these people over to the cartels so they can get these people out of their countries and transfer that cost to us, the United States of America. And this is why every town's a border town. Every state is a border state. I asked Mayorkas when he was before us about how they quantify little drugs apprehended, because he was saying, oh, we apprehended 14,000 pounds of fentanyl at the border last year. So I said, let's talk about that number, because that is an inaccurate number. And if you dig down on this, you are not counting what our state and local law enforcement officials are catching. You're not counting what the DEA is apprehending. You're not counting what they apprehend in marine and air operations. So all of those numbers, nobody is counting. So I told him, I said, look, I want you to go back and reconfigure this. Let's pull not only what Border Patrol is getting, but what you're getting through the other law enforcement and the intel agencies at your local, state, and federal level, so that we have a better picture of how much is coming into this country. And this is why you've got Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, and I pulling together on a package. Lindsey's bill would recognize the cartels as terrorist organizations. Tom's would reclassify fentanyl to a Schedule I drug, which stiffens the penalties. And mine says when a sheriff or a law enforcement officer arrest somebody who is trafficking people in drugs, their government benefits are cut off immediately. Sheriffs and policemen tell me a lot of these guys live in public housing and they're drawing government benefits. No taxpayer should be paying for these guys to live in government housing and run a side hustle trafficking women, children, or trafficking drugs.
Yeah, I think, you know, as someone who advised secretaries, I understand that he can't say what he's really going to do, because if he gave you a flat answer, he's like, we have let in as many people as we can, and we're going to continue doing so. That is the policy of this administration. And when you talk about fentanyl, neither Becerra nor Mayorkas are doing anything to address the biggest public health risk we have seen in quite some time. As we are doing this interview, as we're sitting here this morning, every 3 minutes an American will die of a fentanyl overdose.
Yes, and I was in Chattanooga a few weeks ago, and the sheriff and DA there showed me a picture of a bunch that are pressed to look like sweet tarts. And they apprehended bags in Chattanooga. And it is so pervasive. And here is the reason why. Joe Biden is perceived as being very weak. He will not challenge China, who is making fentanyl, and he will not challenge the cartels who are distributing fentanyl. And the border is wide open. And therefore, the cartels see this as a time that they can expand. Last fall, TBI told us, cartels, they have a presence. They are active in Tennessee. Now think about that. And think about that in relation to crime that is in our cities. Think about what is happening to rural communities. And it is because we're not securing that southern border.
Well, when you let in 15 million people that have no pathway to citizenship, I don't know what they expect. I mean, I don't see that how they see that anything positive will either come from the American people or people who are going to be forced to live illegally off the grid. It's not good for anyone. And they can't defend the policy, and so they just kind of, you know, I don't know how they sit in front of you and testify, quite frankly. And I know some people make, you know, they use it to make political points, but this is a serious issue. I am shocked that they've been able to get away with it as long as they have.
And fentanyl kills more Americans age 18 to 45 than anything.
Leading cause of death. Leading cause of death.
Leading cause of death is fentanyl. And it is the fastest growing cause of death of children under 18. And we need this administration to work with us in order to secure that border and to keep this fentanyl out of the United States. And something that's really interesting, if you talk to countries in Europe, if you're talking to other countries, they do not have the fentanyl problem that we have in the United States. Mm-hmm. This is something that China, with the cartels, have targeted us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Senator, there's so much more I'd like to get to. Could I beg you to stay with us for a very short break and come back and discuss China?
I am. I'm going to have about 5 minutes. I'm pulling up to my next meeting right now.
Okay. Great. Okay. Tell you what. We'll stay right here then. So we will push the break. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing from China as it relates to spy balloons and to TikTok? Because all these stories kind of keep getting worse and worse.
Well, and as you know, China first sanctioned me and then they banned me. And they did it because I have been speaking up about the dangers of China surveilling our citizens and the dangers of Confucius Institutes and Confucius classrooms. And we know that what they're trying to do is to spy on us. And now we find out what they were really doing with the spy balloon and how they were letting it sashay across the country and did nothing of it. And this is something they could have taken down. The balloon was being remote controlled. They knew this. I mean, it was cutting figure eights up there in Alaska and Idaho. And they chose not to do this. There again, you've got a weak leader who is known to be weak and recognized as weak.
Well, yeah, and even his excuse for not shooting it down was weak, because I get that you don't want it to fall in a civilian area, but are you telling me when it took 2 days to cross Alaska, we couldn't have taken it out then?
Well, they could have, and there are ways they could have walked that balloon down by sending up some balloons to attach to it and then taking out the balloon and walking it down. There are ways they could have done that. But what we do know is until we stop China from surveilling us, they're going to continue to try to surveil us. And getting not only TikTok, but other of these entities that are spying on us using social media, putting these protections in place. There is a bill that Marco Rubio has that would go after the surveillance aspect. I have the Kids Online Safety Act. These are the right steps. I'm not in favor of the Restrict Act, because instead of giving the power to control their data to the individual, it gives that power to the government, and I am not for that.
Well,
I don't want China surveillance. I don't want government surveillance.
Yeah, I think this is another example of D.C. where they say they have a bipartisan bill, and the solution ends up being worse than the problem. And
That's right.
I think at a time...
It convolutes it.
Well,
it convolutes it. And people will think they're being protected, but then you got Big Brother with the info.
Well, my issue was that it left it specifically to the executive branch and cut you guys out of the loop. And
I'm not for that. That's the problem already. And I've been fighting this. I've worked on online privacy for years. My goal is to allow you, the individual, to control your virtual you, your presence online. I don't want the insurance company, the social media platform, the hospital, the bank, anybody else controlling and having first right of refusal and usage on your data. Who sees that, who uses that, that is for you to say, not somebody else.
Yeah, amen. I think the whole line of logic that we're going to allow the executive branch to have the ability to spy on us to prevent China from spying on the country is, as you said, a little convoluted.
Yes, it is indeed. So, well, I am at my stop. I will see you soon and talk to you soon, my friend. Take care.
Thank you, Senator. Have a great day.
You got it. Bye-bye.
We're going to do a commercial break, and we will be back on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
.30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories on this Tuesday morning. Now we've got a problem on the West Loop downtown. Some road work has the on-ramp left lane blocked from 40 westbound to go northbound on 65. Then in Rutherford County, road work, only one lane open, 24 eastbound at Church Street, the same place yesterday. That is a 33-minute delay, about a 3-mile backup. Well, the U.S. military alliance's border with Russia has doubled now that Finland's officially a NATO member. Secretary General Jan Stoltenberg at a flag-raising ceremony in Brussels said Russian President Putin's intimidation and aggression didn't work.
Finland brings substantial and highly capable forces, expertise on national resilience, and years of experience working side by side with NATO allies.
Russia had said it would take retaliatory measures if Finland joined, although it's unclear how Russia would do that. And all ears and eyes on the Manhattan courtroom, where former President Trump will be arraigned today in the porn star Stormy Daniels hush money case. Trump legal team member Joe Tacopina.
There will be no guilty plea in this case. That's one thing I can guarantee you. I don't think this case is going to see a jury. I think it's going to go away on papers. I think there's a legal challenge that will be made and should be made successfully.
The indictment is sealed, but sources tell ABC News Trump faces about 24 felony counts. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. I've been teaching investing on Nashville airwaves for over 20 years with the Investor Coaching Show. And in that time, I taught a lot about how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11 or jumping into energy stocks or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors, because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
having a great morning. At this stage of the show, I would like to welcome on into the program our next guest, Jack Calventrinos. Jack is the consummate DC insider, but still a normal person that I'm pleased to announce. He is the founder of JK Strategies, a former Bush, and served with me in the Trump administration at HHS, and most importantly for our show today, a fellow Masters fanatic. Jack, welcome.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was quite an intro. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thanks for being with us today. Before we get to fun stuff, I want to see if there's anything that we do need to cover for our listeners. And I know you are almost literally right there on the Beltway as far as where you live. But we have, we've talked a lot about the trial. We've talked a lot about President Trump. But we do have some other entrants into the race, and want to just make sure that people know that. Former head of the State Department, Nikki Haley, is now joined the race. Asa Hutchinson, and from Arkansas, and also Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but your take on any of them?
Yeah, we have the GOP has such a strong bench, and you try to imagine the folks that you just mentioned, and then others that you didn't, up on a stage, the ones that are likely to run, and Secretary Pompeo. I mean, what an amazing group of substantive leaders. And, the one that people know the least about, Vivek Ramaswamy, I think he's actually the one right now who is actually articulating, as Senator Blackburn said, this assault on American freedoms almost better than anybody. Now, he doesn't have a chance, but thank God he's actually part of the fray and lending his voice.
I tell you, he's brilliant and has been a very successful businessman. But B, what I appreciate the most about him is he did an incredible job explaining to people the dangers of this far woke culture and how it's adversely affecting corporate America. They say, go woke, go broke. And we just see with company after company, whether it's Bud Light, whether it's Disney, of losing focus on who their clients are.
He literally wrote the book a year ago called Woke Inc., and he actually put his money where his mouth is and started something called Strive Assets, which I hope more, financial executives do, which is creating an investment fund that invests in companies that are keeping their core business the focus of their business, not woke politics. So, no, I admire that. And part of my business with JK Strategies, I'm really trying to counsel companies. It's time to go back to neutral. It's time to say we're not going to be controlled by this small vocal minority that wants us to go left, that aligns with the Democratic Party. We have a business to run. We have our own set of values and mission statements, and should be doing what's best for our company, our employees, and our shareholders.
Yeah, and it just gets back to common sense. And I'll tell you what it reminds me of is Michael Jordan, when he was being pressed to support a Democratic Senate candidate in North Carolina, famously had the comment, well, Republicans buy sneakers too.
He did say that, and that sums it up.
And he got the drill. Nothing more needs to be said. But I'll tell you what's interesting about him. The left hates him, and for a variety of reasons. But because he's taking woke straight on, but also because he is a person of color, they despise him even more because he's not towing what they think he should be putting out there. And a lot of times you get candidates in the Republican primary. And he obviously probably a long shot to win the nomination, but you never know what could come of that. And I just have this vision of the possibility of a Trump Ramaswamy ticket, and just I can hear the heads of the left just exploding.
Yes.
So in that sense, it could be great sport.
Hey, I'm going to mention a person that I don't think has been mentioned yet, and maybe I'm wrong, but she just was fantastic on the Bill Maher show, which is Winsome Sears, the new lieutenant governor. of Virginia. And as an African-American Marine, retired Marine, she was so great. She had Bill Maher, agreeing with her. And I think she is a star to watch her star rise in the future.
Well, we talked about this earlier, but I think that it's kind of a sign of the times that now Bill Maher has become the adult supervision of these woke children.
Yes.
And he reminds them, if they ever want to win again, you might want to change some of your approaches to this because you're alienating 85% of the country.
How is it that it's just him? I mean, I don't even hear Carville saying that anymore. It used to be Carville would sort of deliver that message to Democrats. It's really unbelievable how far left the main part of the Democratic Party has moved.
Yeah. Yeah, and I got to say, we had just had on Senator Blackburn, and I assumed, knowing her the way I do, that she was not on this Restrict Act. But just to touch on it, I mean, this bill is a complete disaster, and it's what we do in D.C. We see a threat, and then the solution is far worse than what the actual threat is. Now, to be clear, nobody should use TikTok. When we served in the Trump administration, you and I were told in no uncertain terms to not use the app because of the potential for the Chinese to spy, and President Trump banned it for all federal employees. Which was a very smart move to do. And what we should have is, instead of passing bills, President Biden should deliver a strong Reagan-style address to the nation explaining why you shouldn't be using this and why your children shouldn't be using this. But the odds of that happening are not good.
Right.
But it is something else. And they say in this bill that which is far too broad and vague. It talks about foreign threats, but it leaves the interpretation of what constitutes a foreign threat to the executive branch with no congressional output. And again, it's this sense of, you need to allow us these expansive powers to spy on you to make sure that China is not spying on you. And, we saw this before in the Patriot Act, and I don't think there is any interest in the Republican Party of going back to that. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that most Democrats would support that.
Yeah, I hear you. And it is sort of like coming back a little bit. It kind of reminds me of this whole use of the term misinformation and having the Democratic Party and liberals kind of own the word and then become the definers of it. Look, this administration did something so Orwellian, they had to pull back from it because of the mockery and opposition, which is creating this crazy disinformation board. I mean, it truly is something out of George Orwell.
Oh my gosh! Even similar. They were smart enough to get rid of that woman who was going to run that board, the lunatic that sang her songs on YouTube.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful, serious person, kind of like Rachel Levine back at HHS where you and I served.
Oh,
really, really serious person in a Senate-confirmed position. I'm being sarcastic, but it really annoys me, and I recently tweeted about this, that we had the honor to serve with Dr. Brett Giroir, a fine doctor from Texas who took his job very seriously as Assistant Secretary of Health, and in Bush it was Dr. John Aguinobi. And to think we have this person now whose main priority is redefining, gender and making it easier for kids and young people to get these mutilating surgeries is absolutely sickening to me. It really is sickening and sad.
Yeah, and I talked earlier about it's not just the president, it's the people that he surrounds himself with. And it's really a sad state of affairs. There's no plan from Secretary Becerra or HHS to address the fentanyl crisis, but transgender surgery for youth should be what's front and center.
I'm so glad you and the good senator, spent that kind of time on the interview, because I was listening to it, very happy to do that, about fentanyl, because with all of the attention that it still gets, I'm still not sure people really understand how it is the number one killer, like you said, Matt, and also we prioritized it. We were making a difference, and this administration has made it worse with the open border, plus with COVID, more people are taking it. But what really sickens me is that the leadership at the White House and HHS has not made fentanyl their top issue the way we made it in the Trump administration. I'm so proud of the work we did, but I'm also sickened by the fact that they have not prioritized it.
Yeah, well, it's hard to prioritize it when your policies have caused the problem. And I think I really think that is their hesitancy to address it. But for people who are supposed to be in charge of public health and public health policy to not address it, I hope that they get raked over the coals for this when they go in front of. And by the way, that's not just Republicans. We are hearing growing echoes from our Democratic colleagues that are like, no, this is a problem, and you guys need to come up with a plan.
Yes.
It's not like the border where we're just going to keep it going for another year and a half until we have a change of administration. This needs to be addressed now. Okay, this is stressing me out. And so I want to have a moment of zen, and this always helps me. Just let it wash over you. We had a super we had a super texter just say, if you are going to speak of the Masters, you need to do so in Jim Nance's voice. You want to welcome us in, Jack?
Welcome, friends. Jim Nance, CBS Sports. Happy to be here today with Matt Bassett here at Augusta.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all.
That's pretty good, Jack. Yeah. That's pretty good.
And I got to tell you, very nice for impromptu. And Jim Nance is actually now, at least partially or part-time, a resident of Tennessee. He has built a home here, is an avid golfer. And I got to tell you, it would be kind of intimidating to play with him. Because if he did play-by-play standing over a putt, I don't think there's any chance I would make that.
No way.
And he did it to Grant Hill at the Final Four, and he left it short. And then he gave him a do-over. But that's a lot of pressure when you hear Jim Nance's voice. But the one good thing that is we're all going to have to end the week is we have the Masters golf tournament. And so we can put all this ridiculous noise aside and just enjoy it. This is my favorite tournament in the world. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's something that many of our past presidents have been into as well. And, I asked our super texters if they had any stories to share. So now would be the time. But I know you have gotten to go. I have gotten to go. I was fortunate to go the last time Phil Mickelson won. And then I was there the year that Patrick Reed won. And it really is like Disneyland. If you're a golfer, it is just an amazing experience to go through, and you hear these stories. So I was at Berkman's place, which is kind of the members area, the last time I was there, and I went into the parking.
The most special place within the most special place.
Yeah, it was mind blowing. But we were standing by where the actual members would park, and someone pointed out to me this nondescript 10-year-old Honda Accord with the bumper sticker on it. It was an ugly brown. And the bumper sticker read, "Jesus loves you. Everyone else thinks you're a bleep hole." And it was Lou Holtz's car. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I believe that is Lou Holtz's car. That sounds just like Coach, doesn't it? And then I was playing out of state because I want to give this guy some distance. And he was telling me that these members of the Masters have a really good time. And they have a Thanksgiving party that basically doesn't have a budget. And if you were there last year, you would be fortunate enough to see a former Secretary of State grab the mic and sing this song. Do we have that? Do we have it? Now, out of respect for the Masters, I'm not going to name this person by name, but I will give our listeners a hint. It is not Hillary Rodham Clinton. what I would pay to see that. These folks have apparently a very, very good time, and I think we're all going to have a good time this weekend in a tournament that is really, each year I think the Masters is going to be better than last, but you have all of these subplots. You have the players that have left the PGA Tour for the LIV. Apparently they're planning some antics. They may even wear kind of like a team uniform, was the latest rumor that I heard. I think you had pointed out, Jack, that if one of the LIV players wins, they're all going to show up at the same time, dressed the same way to honor that person. So there's going to be a little tension out there.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing that. They're having tonight the big champions dinner, so that should be some awkward moments with 6 of the LIV former Masters winners there at dinner, and people like Fred Couples, everyone's favorite, has been not shy about his feelings about what people like Sergio and others have been saying about the PGA. So this will, as Jim Nantz says, will be a tournament like no other.
Well, and when you add to that just the very fact that Tiger Woods is playing.
Yeah.
And for those who saw him play at Riviera this year, his ball striking was as good as anyone on tour. And with all the health ailments that he has had to deal with, he swings a driver as fast as any of them out there. He's in the mid 180s, 180, 183, 184 miles an hour on ball speed. I mean, if he is even slightly competitive, this will be one of the most watched sporting events ever.
Yeah, and I was fortunate to be there in 2019, saw him come up on the 18th on Friday, and he was playing well and got a really warm welcome, but I'm not sure anyone realistically thought that he would end up doing what he did, which is winning the whole thing, really one of the greatest achievements in sports, considering what he came back from. Hey, I wanted to mix Masters, if you got a moment, Matt, with presidential politics.
Please do.
I was doing a little research, and people always talk about presidents who love golf, and people talk about Obama for some reason, and we know the Bushes and their wonderful history, but Dwight D. Eisenhower didn't just love the Masters. He went to Augusta 45 times, 29 during his presidency, and actually became a member 3 years after the end of World War II in 1948. But the craziest thing, and I'm just not sure why this doesn't get mentioned every year, is the story about President Reagan and what happened when he was there. Do you have a moment?
We got about 30 seconds if you can get it in.
30 seconds. He was there in 83. And a local Augusta guy with a gun broke through gate 3, made it into the pro shop, held 7 people, including some White House aides, hostage. Reagan then called the pro shop to try to calm the guy down. He shot his gun through the window to show that it still worked, and eventually gave himself up. And then later that night, in the middle of the night, sadly the Beirut barracks were bombed, and Reagan had to deal with probably his number one foreign policy crisis of his first term there at Augusta in one of the cabins.
So
is
just
the
a
crazy visit for him.
Wow. That is, I vaguely remember that story, but so the bottom line is he never got to play.
Yeah, I can't imagine there was time between those two things, and I'm sure he never went back. Like karma. I think he just preferred going to Palm Springs for his New Year's round of golf.
Yes. Well, I hope all of our listeners who feel as strongly about the tournament as I do have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And just want to remind folks, thanks, Jack, for joining us today. We'll have you back, and we'll be right back on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
11 o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. We've got some construction slowing everyone down on I-40 westbound, right there at 65 to go northbound on the West Loop downtown. Then south of Nashville, Rutherford County, you're down to one lane, eastbound 24 at exit 81. That's going to be Church Street there in Murfreesboro. It's backed up for about a mile, and it's a 51-minute delay. Right now in Tennessee, Governor Lee and leading lawmakers working to expand school safety in light of the Covenant school shooting to include putting armed security guards in every school, even private schools if they wish. There's also money to deal with mental health in schools, which Speaker of the Tennessee House Cameron Sexton supports.
The governor's proposal expands this in K through 12 schools, gives the schools the capability to handle students in crisis at that moment of time.
Meanwhile, one of the three Democrat state reps facing expulsion for breaking decorum by using a bullhorn to call for gun control on the state house floor last week is Nashville State Rep Justin Jones. And last night on the House floor, Jones compared it to what the Bible teaches about Jesus in the temple.
I want to talk about this Holy Monday, that God is not pleased with injustice, and that the light will shine, and that no matter what you do to us, we will not bow down.
Representative Jones, you will have your chance to defend yourself on Thursday.
Yeah, we'll let you know what happens. U.S. military alliance's border with Russia has doubled. That's the Finnish national anthem during a flag-raising ceremony welcoming Finland into NATO this morning. Finland's president says his country now feels more secured. And right now in New York, all ears and eyes on the courthouse in Manhattan, where former President Trump will be arraigned on charges in the hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels. Here's M. Nguyen.
It's a crisp, chilly, and busy morning. There are sirens down the street, and there's a park right next to the courthouse. In there are dueling protesters, some for, some against the former president. There's a line of media set up, a line of tents outside the courthouse. There's also barricades around the courthouse, which is normally unusual, but not for something so unprecedented like today.
That arraignment is set for 1:15 Middle Tennessee time. Trump's lawyer says he's going to plead not guilty. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
And we're back on Super Talk 997 WTN. Good afternoon, Nashville. I'd like to, at this time, we're thrilled to be joined by my good friend and colleague, Rick Grenell, and so I'd like to welcome him on into the program. Rick,
hey,
how
Matt,
are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Now, Rick, most of our viewers know who you are, but most recently you served as the Director of National Intelligence for President Trump and was actually the person who gave him his daily security briefings. And since leaving office, you have stayed very close with the president. You are one of his confidants. We've reported extensively on this show on what's going on in Manhattan today. Can you give us a sense of how the president's doing and how he's facing all this? Because we know that he's a super tough guy, and we know that he does not back down from a fight. But I would just think, as a human being, that this would start to weigh in a person after a while.
Well, look, I'm in Mar-a-Lago right now. I'm speaking to you from Mar-a-Lago. He's in New York. I will see him later tonight when he returns. He's going to have a big speech tonight to kind of talk about these issues. But I think what's clear is that people in the United States, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, you see what's happening. You see the ruling party, the Democrats, arresting and trying to take out the leading opposition figure. Now, as you know, Matt, I've worked at the State Department for 12 years. This is the kind of stuff that we call out in other countries. When dictators, third world leaders do this in other countries. And it's pretty routine. It is one of the political tools that they use in third world countries. And that is when you are in power and your opponent is rising, you use the levers of government to arrest your opponent, try to put them in jail, and take them out so that they can't run against you. It many times backfires because what happens is just the normal, hardworking, independent people see it as a real shady move. And that's what we're seeing right now with Joe Biden. I mean, there are very few people who, around the world, dictators, who are willing to do it. And one of the reasons why the Democrats in Washington are willing to do this is because they control the media in Washington. There's little pushback. And so when you have ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, all of these people who are working in Washington, covering the media, but really pushing the Democratic agenda, you see the tragedy of how the independent media in America has just imploded. We don't have unbiased media, and that's why the Democrats keep weaponizing government and keep getting away with it.
Indeed. How do you see all of this playing out? I know that we haven't even seen what the indictments are. We should know nothing about this at all. It should be sealed, and yet this grand jury and this DA are leaking everything like a sieve. And we could be in a situation where this drags on for years.
Well, it's going to drag on for years, Matt, for sure, because let's be honest, these charges are ridiculous.
Yep.
Most legal scholars are looking at these and saying, they're going to fall apart. This is just for the moment. This is just for the headlines for the next couple of months. They're trying to stop him from running for president. But legally, it won't do much because the charges are going to fall apart. I mean, come on, 30-plus charges.
34, yeah.
I mean, come on. Nobody believes this is actually real. This is all political. I've even seen the polling from Democrats where they're admitting that this is totally political. And here's the problem with that. It's Donald Trump today, but it's you with the IRS tomorrow. I mean, let's be clear about what happened to Matt Taibbi.
Absolutely.
Who was testifying in front of Congress only to find the IRS at his doorfront. This is what they're doing. We've just got to stop voting for these people. You've got to stop voting for Democrats who are literally weaponizing government, and the media are allowing it to happen because they're a part of the party. They are a fundamental part of this ruling class.
Yeah, and I think that that supporters of the president and those who don't, I think you're just fair-minded American citizen is just outraged regarding the weaponization of the justice system. And I do think it has people to say, well, if they can go after a former president who is a billionaire, what would stop them from coming after me, my business, and my family? And I think it's a very fair question for folks to ask.
Well, it's a scary question. It's something that if you talk to any first or second generation American, they will tell you that this is why they left countries that were controlled by totalitarianists, by fascists, by people who controlled the media. The people who are screaming the loudest, the canaries in the coal mine right now, are first and second generation Americans who left all of this chaos and who see the writing on the wall, what's happening in America. We got to stop voting for these Democrats because the party is getting more left and more crazy with every single day.
Yeah, and I think in some cases, I think this DA is like a dog that actually caught the car he was chasing. And I don't think this is going to play out the way that the woke left mob hopes that it will. And, we're already seeing in the initial polling that this is doing nothing but, in Bill Maher words, adding rocket fuel to the president's primary challenge. And I think more and more Americans, even those who may have preferred to see another candidate, are kind of rallying to him in support of the fundamental unfairness.
Well, let me just say this to the independents and to the people who don't have a propensity to vote for Donald Trump. You have to be careful on what you're voting for next November, because if you keep voting and allow this left to take over our United States and continue their ways, you're not going to have a country left. I mean, many great civilizations have lasted roughly 250 years. They've all imploded from within. You look at our budget, the $30+ trillion national debt. You look at the wokeism that's taking over our schools. We have kids graduating who cannot read or write. We've got a Supreme Court justice who didn't know the definition of a woman. This is crazy. This is going to implode our country. And you may not like mean tweets, but you need to vote for people who understand the power of the United States and who can bring us back to sanity, bring back common sense.
Yes. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for all that you do and for your continued support of the former president. And there are so many issues. I know that you have been very kind, that you're visiting with all the major media outlets. So it was great for you to come on and be willing to spend time with our listeners and to give us some much needed perspective on this. And we will have you back to talk about how our foreign affairs is falling apart. But thank you, Rick, and have a wonderful day.
All the best, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to do a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we will have Ken Alexandro. We will be talking about the brave officers in the Covenant School shooting and their actions and how it saved countless lives. So stay with us on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Road work getting in the way right now downtown, the West Loop. The on-ramp, left lane blocked from 40 westbound to 65 northbound. And then in Rutherford County, 24 eastbound is down to one lane at Church Street. It is stop and go for about a mile there, starting at, about a mile up there at Highway 99, a 51-minute delay. All ears and eyes on the Manhattan courtroom where former President Trump will be arraigned. And we'll let you hear what's going on outside the courtroom coming up at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. This is Matt Bassett, and I am thrilled to have with us our next guest, Ken Alexandro, who was with the Metro Nashville Police Department for 26 years and with the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force from 2002 to 2005. He has served the last several years as a training officer in his career, providing real-world instruction to new recruits coming out of the academy. After leaving the force, Ken founded Agape Tactical. The company began as a faith-based organization that got its start teaching churches, schools, and other faith-based organizations the art of safety and self-preservation. It has quickly expanded to include training hospitals, surgery centers, and other corporate entities. Now, Ken has spent much of the last week sharing his expertise with local and national news outlet regarding the tragic events that occurred last Monday at the Nashville Covenant School. And with that, I want to welcome in Ken. Ken, how are you?
I'm great, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being with us. And full disclosure, Ken is a personal friend of mine, and that is because our wives grew up together in Dixon. And I can tell you as a spouse, it is always nice when your wife's best friend is such a great guy. Because it doesn't always work out that way.
Sure.
So Ken, thanks for being with us. I know your schedule has been super busy with all the outlets who've wanted your expertise, so I appreciate you being with us. With all the coverage of these events, I wanted to turn particular attention to the bravery and heroism of the Nashville Police Department, and specifically the actions of Officer Rex Engelbert and Michael Collazo. And even cynics in the national media have called their response the gold standard for dealing with these horrific incidents. Ken, if you would, walk us through the success that the Nashville Police Department had compared to the incidents and the horror that we saw in cities like Uvalde, Texas, and in the town adjacent to my hometown, Parkland, Florida.
Well, the success all starts with training. And let's talk about the cohesiveness in training. What a lot of people don't know is the responding officers don't work together. They responded from different precincts. Some were detectives, some were narcotics officers, some were patrol officers. And they all came together, and they had a unified response, and that is critical. So when they get trained at the academy and they get trained at in-service twice a year, the training is consistent throughout. Day one and day 365 is going to be the same training, so everyone can speak the same language. So no matter who you pull up on a call with, you should know what to do and how to move and the verbiage and the language that we use. So that's number one. When Rex initially pulled, and we all can see this on YouTube because I'll kind of go through the videos. I broke it down for the media. First thing Rex did was arrive promptly, got his rifle out, and the lady, I think she was a teacher. I'm not 100%, but I think she was a teacher at the school. She immediately gave concise, direct information, and that is so important. If you're ever a witness in an incident, when the police arrive, give them just what they need to know so they can respond appropriately. And she did exactly that. She also gave them a key to the school because, as we know, the school was locked down. So Rex gets the key, and he's about to make entry, and then he sees two other officers that pull up. And to his credit, we are trained, if one officer shows up, one goes in. But he saw that he had officers that were seconds away, so he yelled, "Give me three, give me three." So they joined him as he opened the door, and they moved as a cell or as a unit, okay? As they moved in, they were in what's called search mode because they had not yet heard shots fired at this time. So they're looking for the suspect. And the rule of thumb is we never pass an open or unlocked door until we've searched it, okay? So if in search mode, if there's a door open, you saw that they went to the first room on the right, and they used what we call the 5 absolutes of room clearing. These are uncontested no matter who you are. Those 5 absolutes, if we had the 10 commandments of room clearing tactics, these would be on a tablet, and that is through the door, clear the danger corner, run the wall, clear the center, and communicate. And they did that flawlessly. So Rex and his
Michael?
partner, they went in. No, Michael was he was with another group.
Oh, okay.
So Michael and Rex met up later in the call. They met up upstairs on the stairwell. So Rex and the officer immediately went into the room and did those 5 absolutes. They found a closet they had to clear. But the third officer did what he was supposed to do, was stay in the doorway and maintain cover down the hallway so no one could sneak up on him. And then when they got done with that room, they went to the next room, and then so on and so on. And then during the search mode process, they heard shots fired. Well, as soon as you hear that, we know that the incident is going on, and the rule is every shot that was fired or every second that was wasted, someone dies. So we go immediately to that threat. So they had to find this open stairwell, climb the stairwell. They used a bounding overwatch technique to go up the stairwell. You saw that they had to walk over a body, and we can get to that later. But they progressed down the hallway, and if you'll notice, Rex had the rifle, which he should be the lead. The biggest gun should take the primary position, and then you had a shotgun next to him and then a pistol. So Rex clears, he slices the pie, he sees the suspect kind of trapped in the corner of that room, yells verbal challenges, and engages, I believe, 3 shots to the subject. Then as they were Michael went over, he had the pistol and was yelling commands, drop the weapon, apparently, and of course we can't see it. The suspect did not comply, and he finished the job with 3 shots with a pistol. But it worked because of cohesion. Everyone knew what each other was doing, so they worked flawlessly together.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation. And I know that the officers are lauded for the amount of time it took for them to complete their mission. Can you talk to that as compared to some of these other shootings?
Absolutely. So the average response time in the United States for Code 3 response, which means lights and sirens, okay? Officers are trying to get there as fast as they can, is 9 to 12 minutes. 9 to 12 minutes. From the time they were dispatched to the time the call was over was 11 minutes total. So if you think about that, they finished the call before the average just response time in the United States when officers could arrive. So they finished it before most people even show up. And I mean, that is tremendous. And when you think about Parkland and Uvalde, they, listen, I don't, man, I'm a trainer. I'm a lifelong cop, and it's heartbreaking to see. But obviously, those things did not happen. They categorized the active shooter as a barricaded subject, and people were dying. And they waited. I think it was 82 minutes or 78 minutes total, and it cost 19 children and 2 teachers.
Yeah.
So you really can't compare Parkland and you can't compare Uvalde with what happened here.
Yeah, I think that is spot on. We are going to need, Ken, there's so much to get to here. I'm hoping you can stay with us after the break, and I want to let our callers know if anybody has questions for Ken after the break, we're going to open up the phone lines, and we would be happy to answer your questions or receive your comments. And we will be right back with Ken Alexandro on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, our traffic problems are growing. Now let's add an injury crash to the mix. This is blocking Nolensville Pike at Barnes Road. Elsewhere in Nashville, the West Loop downtown. Road work has the on-ramp left lane blocked from 40 westbound to 65 northbound. And then south of Nashville, eastbound 24 in Rutherford counties down to one lane at Church Street in Murfreesboro for some road work. All ears and eyes on the Manhattan courtroom where former President Trump will be arraigned on charges related to hush money payments to porn actress Stormy Daniels today. It's drawing a crowd outside.
Trump! Viva Trump! He's going to win. Doesn't matter what the left does. We love him. We love Trump.
Arraignment set for 1:15 Middle Tennessee time. Finland officially joining NATO during a formal ceremony in Brussels this morning, marking the first NATO expansion in decades, and it doubles Russia's border with the military alliance, something Russian President Vladimir Putin does not like. And that's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. I've been teaching investing on Nashville airwaves for over 20 years with the Investor Coaching Show. And in that time, I taught a lot about how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11, or jumping into energy stocks, or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors, because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
And we're back on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, joined by security expert, retired law enforcement officer Ken Alexandro. I wanted to, there's just so much to unpack here, and we've got some super texter comments that I want to get to, and take calls if folks want to ask you questions. And just to let folks know, those phone lines are open. One of the things that you mentioned, and I didn't want to interrupt your explanation, Ken, but because I've gotten some feedback on this, a lot of us have had a chance to view the body cam footage, and again, I can't stress enough the courage where these officers hurled themselves towards danger with no concern for themselves. It was inspiring to watch. But I have gotten a lot of questions. A lot of people who've seen the body cam footage, I think, noted at one point that one of the officers, when pursuing a suspect, actually stepped over the body of someone that was wounded. And people have asked, why did that play out like that? And was that something that was necessary given the situation? So I wanted to let you address that.
Sure, that's part of the training. The number one priority in an active shooter scenario is stop the threat. Stop the threat. And please understand, the hardest thing for a first responder to do is to bypass someone that needs help. But if we don't bypass that subject and stop the threat, every second we delay, the possibility someone else gets hurt. So we are trained, we are taught. If people cling on to you or they try to grab you, and you've got to brush them away, or if someone is down and they're injured, you have to step over them and take care of your first, number one, and your only responsibility at that moment is mitigate the threat. Once the threat is mitigated and the secondary search is done and the scene is rendered clear, see, you got to understand, MedCom won't even come into a scene with the potential that it's still there's still danger. So they have to mitigate the threat, secondary search done, clear it as soon as possible, so then we can allow the medical professionals to render aid. But that is the national standard in training, and it looks callous to someone who doesn't know why. But just keep in mind, their only responsibility at that moment is mitigate the threat.
Yep. Well, thank you for the explanation, because folks have been asking about that. Also, I want to clear these up to see what is fact and fiction, because so much has been reported. It has been reported that the shooter had considered other targets, but decided on what she viewed as a softer target. Can you verify if that's the case?
So I'm not privy to any information of, I was not involved in the search of the residence or things like that, but I will tell you, I have also heard that reported from multiple sources. So that's the best confirmation that I can do.
But because of your expertise on this and all the work you've done to take soft targets and to make them firmer targets, and in doing so, less attractive to people who are deranged that would do something like this. What is it that a shooter looks at when considering the targets they select? And I know it's difficult to get into the mind of someone like this, but you do have the expertise.
Sure. So there's always going to be some type of pre-attack surveillance on a target, because you have to understand what in the mind of a terrorist, whether they're foreign or domestic, what is the one thing they fear more than anything else? And it is not a man or a woman with a gun. It is failure. So when they're assessing a target, they're assessing, can I get in? How much damage can I do? How quickly can I do it? And by the way, escape is generally not in their plan. They're either going to commit suicide, or they're expecting suicide by cop, or their plan is to be the police will eliminate the threat. They're not going home. That's generally not the plan. They know what their outcome's going to be. But so they're how do we? So we employ a philosophy called deter, detect, and deny. The deterrence is the psychological defeat of a suspect before they ever get on your property, they can see that whatever their plan is, it won't work. For example, how do you make a soft target a harder target? If you have somebody outside the organization, outside of the building in the parking lot, with some type of a vest on, yellow vest identifying that they're with the organization, or a security guard, or a police officer, or just something outside that can spot the threat before they even approach the building, they'll go somewhere else. Okay, so that is a psychological deterrent, because they failed. The possibility, the potential is they'll fail before they even get in. They'll go somewhere else. So that is a way to harden a target.
And on that line, continuing, can you explain to us how the shooter was able to gain access to the school? Just for context, we know that at Uvalde, they got in through an open door, so there's been a big focus on that. But how was this shooter able to gain access?
Sure, the school did part of their policies and lockdown protocols, and they just had training on this within the last year, and they did a great. All the doors were locked. There's no one is questioning that. All the doors were locked and secured. However, you need to know that glass on the outside of a door is tempered. Why is it tempered? Because if someone falls through it, they want it to crumble and fall, because they don't want someone to impale themselves on a shard of glass. So it is made purposefully to crumble and fall away. So as you saw in the multiple videos from the inside of the school, 4 or 5 shots were fired through 2 sets of doors. And this is the same thing that happened at Sandy Hook. The glass crumbled. You saw it shattered. And then she kicked it with her boot or pushed some away, and then made entry that way.
And in your experience, is there anything that can be done as you're in the business of hardening targets that perhaps in the future could deter that type of entry?
Absolutely. When we do assessments, and please understand, this is not Monday morning quarterbacking. This is not saying anything. You've asked me a specific question, and I'm.
And let me make the point that
there's
none of
no
this
piling on here.
No one is being critical of anyone at the school. It's the unfortunate reality that we have to look at and understand what happened, solely with the goal of saying, what can we do better, and how can we prevent a tragedy like this happening again. So thank you for that context.
Sure. When we do assessments, and keep in mind, our buildings are made out of bricks and cinder block and sturdy material, and the weakest aspect of every building happens to be the glass. So, an EverSafe product that we use, EverSafe window laminates, is what we recommend to our clients, which is 57,000 psi. It makes your weakest component now your strength, and it makes it to where they can't make entry. They can shoot it 300 times, and they still can't get in. So. How do I say that? Because I did that. There was a SWAT demonstration. We shot it 300 times and then used hammers and tried to get in. And it still took a SWAT team over 5 minutes to try to enter that piece of glass. And that time is more than enough time for police to respond and mitigate the threat. So there are products out there that can harden or make your weakest asset your strength. Your weakest vulnerability now becomes your strongest asset.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, we had a caller during the break, John, ask an interesting question I hadn't quite thought of. You mentioned that there was a woman out in front who maybe could have been a teacher at Covenant School, kind of giving a quick debrief to police when they showed up about what's going on and how quick she was with it and how great that is. What is it that her job is? Because is that her job to go out in the front when something serious like this is happening? And if so, how is she safe out in the open like that?
Well, I will say, did she put herself at risk? Absolutely, but she put herself at risk for 200 children. Who wouldn't do that? Because if the police don't have the information they need, or even if the police don't have a key, how are they getting in?
Yeah.
So she not only provided life-saving, timely information, but she gave the officers access to the building so they could mitigate that threat. That's why I'm telling you, this is the blueprint for America, for law enforcement response and how people can help us. You always want to have a liaison to coordinate with law enforcement when they're responding. She was that. I did not interview. I have no inside knowledge, but for all practical purposes, she was the liaison between the school and law enforcement, and she was perfect in that 3-second response. I mean, what, 3 to 5 seconds, she explained to the officers what they needed to know, and they were off.
Yeah, there are clearly too many heroes, unfortunately, to name by name in a way that they deserve. This a lot of comments on the super text line. Ken, multiple folks have thanked you for your service and thank you for being willing to come on with us. And Mac, I think we also had one that had a question about the manifest.
Yeah, the manifesto, when they'll release that, if they will release that, what we may find in that, Ken.
Oh, I can't comment on that right now because we don't know if they want to use that for evidentiary purposes, and that could screw a lot of things up. So if the chief and the district attorney decides to release that, that's their wisdom, but that it's not my place to share that. I'm sorry.
No, I think the bigger question is, in cases like this in the past, I think there's a concern among people that it wouldn't be released because it doesn't fit a particular narrative, and that you have a politics angle to this, which, in my opinion, need not be there. But also, we're all kind of speculating because we haven't actually seen it. But I would think in cases like this that eventually it would and could be made public.
Well, I would think in due time, when it's time to be released, I believe it needs to be. But again, that's not my call. But remember our discussion. You're the politics expert, and you'd have a better handle on that than I would.
Yeah, no, my only point is that a political narrative should not enter into this at all. The focus on this is to find out what happened and to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And I know you share those sentiments. And, you know, one of the things...
I believe in transparency, and I think the only way to have full transparency is eventually it needs to come out. And if this organization is a threat to us for the future, we have to know.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that one of the things I have been very pleased with is the way our Governor Lee, has responded to this. And I think it is worth noting that the governor already had $2 million for security enhancements in his 23-24 budget proposal. But since this has happened, there is wide bipartisan support to do more. And from the governor's website, he's enhanced school safety legislation, HB 322, Senate Bill 274. Just a quick overview, enacts a multi-tiered accountability plan to ensure exterior doors are locked while students are present with opportunities for corrective action. State and local enforcement will be authorized to check for unlocked doors, requires that private security guards are held to a high standard and receive active shooter training prior to being posted at Tennessee schools, and requires every school district to establish threat assessments, a nationally recognized best practice to ensure students are connected to support services and behavioral health professionals when appropriate. And, I appreciate this swift action on our governor's behalf, and I would compare and contrast it to President Biden's reaction after the Uvalde shooting. The only thing that he wanted to focus on was guns. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of gun control, but we do have a Second Amendment. And before I'd even discuss that, you'd have to get rid of that. And then you would have to convince me that guns would end up in the hands, those in the hands of those who break the law, that they would not remain there with only good guys not having guns. And as we look to other countries that have enacted the kind of measures that some people are pushing for, you look at England, you look at Australia. Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't they have some of the most highest gun violent incidents and murder rates in the world?
According to the last data, yes.
Yeah.
Because you're taking the guns away from people who can. Just remember, man, bad people don't follow the rules. Good people follow the rules. You know, I heard it said really, really well. Abel killed his brother with a rock. David killed Goliath with a rock. Guess what? It ain't the rock. It's whose hands are the rock in.
Yeah, bad people are going to find ways to do bad things. There is no doubt. But my point with this is not to politicize it. My point is that we should have bipartisan agreement that we should harden these schools. And that is something I think President Biden, after the Uvalde shooting, missed a huge chance to push for that. He would have had huge bipartisan support. And I think, as with many things that he does, he missed a tremendous opportunity. Ken, we're going to do a short commercial break. If you could stay with us, we will be back in just a moment on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. And we're back on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We're coming to the end of the show. Just wanted to make a quick clarification. I think some of the super texters, Ken, in one of your statements thought that you implied that the shooter was part of an organization. I don't think that, I didn't hear that, and I don't think that's what you meant at all, but just wanted to clarify.
No, excuse me. I have no information that's part of an organization. What I meant was the manifesto would, once it's released, it would give us clarity on the reason for the incident. But thanks for letting me clear that. I have one more thing to clear up because I think my pastor may be listening. Cain killed Abel with the rock. I just want to make sure that's the right Bible story. Sorry about that.
We didn't mean to get you in trouble, but Ken, I want to thank you. Right. I want to thank you for being with us this morning. I want to thank you for your service. You are a great human being, a fabulous guest, and our listeners have appreciated you coming on, giving clarity to some of these situations. And we've got a great show.
Can I make a closing comment real quick, Matt?
I'm sorry, Ken, we're out of time, but we will certainly have you back. And folks, we have a great show. Thank you, Ken. A great show for you tomorrow. We're going to have a lot of great guests, Stephen Moore, Senator Haggerty, others to come. Thank you for allowing me to spend time with you. Have a wonderful day.